Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be talking about the Madam Web movie. I definitely think it is one of the movies of all time. Let's talk about it.
Modern movie review.
Alright, so I'm going to start off by saying I'm probably going to be a little bit more negative in this video than I typically am, and I am going to go ahead and say this. I do not want my opinions on this movie to immediately impact you. A lot of people online have already bashed this movie to hell and have said it's one of the worst superhero movies of all time, and I don't necessarily think that that's true. Like, there are definitely a lot of parts of this movie that don't feel great, and I am going to get very deep into that, but I definitely think that calling this the worst superhero movie of all time is kind of a stretch, because some movies like the Ben Affleck Daredevil movie still exist, and this movie I don't think is that bad. But that being said, it's not good at all. There's really, like, very little things to enjoy about this movie, but there are some things here and there that I did kind of enjoy and that I thought were interesting. So, I'm going to give you guys my positive thoughts first, because I do want to start with positivity, and then I'll get into some of the negative stuff later, because there definitely is a lot of negative things. So, right off the bat, something that's positive about it, I think that this movie had some pretty interesting visuals. I think that a lot of people will walk away from this movie and think about, like, how they're really mad because we only see the Spider-Woman for about, like, 2 minutes the entire movie, but I think that you really got to admit that when you do see them, they look great. I think that the short sequences that we get with them as the Spider-Woman look pretty cool. I think that the suits all look incredible, and I really don't understand Sony's reasoning behind spending so much money on getting those suits and, you know, making those suits or whatever, and just pretty much just having them in the trailers. Like, they probably spent a lot of money on those suits, and the fact that they only had them in the movie for about 4 or 5 minutes is kind of disappointing. But that being said, at the end of the day, it's a Madam Web movie. It's not a movie about those Spider-Women. But like I said, the suits looks pretty good. Overall, I think that the vibes of this movie were relatively decent. And by that, I mean, like, this is a movie that takes place in the early 2000s, and I think they do a really good job of making it feel like an early 2000s movie. They have pretty good music during a lot of the sequences. There are also other times where the music seems very unnecessary. But I think that the song choices are relatively decent. The city feeling in New York definitely does feel more nostalgic than I think a current modern day New York would feel like. So I really enjoyed that, and I don't necessarily know why they decided to have this take place in 2003, but I think it actually works for this film a little bit better, because there are some things that happen nowadays that with, like, Amber Alerts and smartphones and stuff like that, wouldn't work in this movie. So I think that them just setting it in 2003 just randomly actually wasn't a bad idea. Like, I think that it worked, like I said, pretty decently for this movie. Another thing that I liked about this movie, going back to kind of the visuals again, because I do think, at the end of the day, I think that the visuals is one of the spots where they did the best with, in my opinion. There are a lot of moments where you kind of see her in the life of, the Web of Life and Destiny or whatever it's called, and it looks great. Like, she's kind of, like, floating there, and there's a lot of, like, spider webs going all over the place. There's a bunch of unraveling, kind of like the finale of Loki, if you've seen it, all the, like, timelines unraveling and going all over the place. It kind of looks like that, and you can kind of see that there's, like, multiple different outcomes that could potentially happen based off of the futures that she's seeing, and I think that that stuff works relatively well. It looks great. It obviously will feel reminiscent of some other things. Like, there's a moment where she gets pushed back, and then her kind of, like, astral projection comes out, and it literally feels, like, ripped out of the 2016 Doctor Strange movie. But that being said, I still think it looks pretty good. I like the visualization of it, and I think that they do some interesting stuff with it. I think that the final action set piece is pretty interesting. Basically, by this point, she's finally mastered her powers, and the women aren't Spider-Woman yet, and Madam Web doesn't necessarily have any powers except for the fact that she can just see the future. So they basically go into a firework factory and just, like, basically, like, suicide bomb. But because Madam Web can see the future, she can tell them when to dodge and when to duck and when to, you know, hide and cover and stuff like that. And I thought that that was an interesting way to end this movie, because, yeah, they're being chased by somebody who's definitely way more powerful than them. How are they going to beat them? A little bit of outsmarting and a little bit of trickery. It worked. I thought it was decent. And overall, I think that the last act of this movie was relatively solid. And if the entire movie lived up to the last act, I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. Okay, so I had a weird cough. My dog started going absolutely crazy. But yeah, that was pretty much everything that I wanted to talk about on the positive side of things. Now to talk about some of the weird, ridiculous things that I really did not like about this movie that I think is kind of the downfall of this movie. So one, I do want to go ahead and say Adam Scott is fun in this, right? Every time he's on screen, he's entertaining. He brings probably the only comedic side of this entire movie. And, like, I like him as a side character. But why did they feel the need to make him Uncle Ben? Because I don't understand Sony's reasoning behind this. Because if you are going to make a movie that is in a Spider-Man adjacent world with Spider-Man adjacent characters, and you are trying so hard to not include Spider-Man in any of these movies, why would you even bother including an Uncle Ben? Why would you even bother including Mary Parker and having her pregnant with the child, and then having her have the child by the end of the movie? Why would you set up the fact that Uncle Ben just met May, so, you know, Aunt May, Uncle Ben, whatever, get that together? Why would you work so hard to include the Parkers as such a huge part of this story if that has nothing to do with the story and you don't care about it? Because obviously they cared at least a little bit that they were like, let's get these characters on in this movie, but they did nothing with them. And it really drives me insane, because what was the point in that? It drives me insane, because, like, here's the thing. If you're not going to make a Spider-Man movie, you're not going to include Peter Parker in a movie, that's fine, right? We don't care. But you felt the need to include Peter Parker in this movie, and it makes no sense. And it's painful to me that we spend so much of this movie with, oh, Madam Web is now going to go to a baby shower because Mary Parker is pregnant. Oh my god, that's crazy. And they're going to play this fun little game, and they're going to try to guess the kid's name or whatever. And then, you know, we're going to get this close to figuring out what the name of the kid is, and then we're just going to have a balloon pop, and that's going to be it. That's going to end the scene. We're not even going to say Peter Parker, which is so painful. And then obviously other moments like when Adam Scott's character and Dakota Johnson's character are sitting down eating Chinese food or whatever, and you know, Adam Scott's like, yeah, I think I found this girl who's like really, really great. I think she might be the one. And, you know, she's just like, oh, what's her name? And it's just dead silent for like a solid like 30 seconds, because they just like have this eye contact moment, and then they're like, oh my god, it's that serious. And they never say May. What's the point of even bringing it up if you're not going to say it? Like, I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to hint at things, but that's not how you do an Easter egg. You do an Easter egg by making one of the license plate numbers like the Spider-Man comic where Madam Web was first introduced. That's an Easter egg, right? But literally driving us to the point where we are almost hearing about May Parker and Ben Parker and Peter Parker and whoever, and not even bothering including them in the story because they're unnecessary to the story, is so annoying. It's so infuriating, and I really hate that they decided to do that. Especially because, like I said, they add nothing to the story. So, to talk about the story overall, I think that the first hour of this movie is so painful to watch. It is incredibly slow. There's a lot of scenes where it's like a 10-minute long conversation, and it feels like it should be about a 2-minute long conversation. And then we have other moments where it's the total opposite, where it's like, okay, these people are meeting for the first time. They need to have some grand introduction so that they all understand who each other are. And instead, we get like 2 minutes of that. And it drives me insane because they set up really early on that, okay, the main characters of this movie are going to be Ben Parker and Madam Web, right? Those are going to be the two main characters. We're going to be focusing on them. And then Ben Parker completely disappears for the entire, like, last hour of the movie, basically. And then we are introduced to the 3 Spider-Women. We're like, okay, these are going to be our main characters. And then we get about 2 minutes of them quickly introducing each other to each other, and that's it. And then we're back to Madam Web doing whatever Madam Web shenanigans she's doing. And I just don't understand how they give us 10-minute long conversations between Adam Scott and Dakota Johnson where they're just eating Chinese food, but then they don't give us any moments with the 4 girls who are the main, you know, poster characters of this movie, and they don't interact at all. I don't understand how you get so many different characters and you get good actresses for each of these roles, and you don't even actually give them a chance to shine. It's really, really weird to me. Something specifically that I didn't like was during the first act, there is a moment where Dakota Johnson obviously is starting to understand her powers, which that's a whole other spiel I'm going to get into in a second. But she's starting to discover her powers or whatever. And then it's the moment from the trailer where, you know, she tells everybody, hey, we need to get off this train. We got to get off this train or whatever. And she does that. She takes all these young women or whatever, goes and steals a taxi for them to drive away with. And then is surprised that, you know, people on, you know, the police officers and everything, thinks that you kidnapped these 3 women, and then she basically just does kidnap the 3 women. And there's never really any point where they're all like, yeah, we feel safe with you, we want to continue being in this car. They're just stuck in that car with her, and then she drives them to the middle of the woods somewhere, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna leave you guys here for 3 hours. What the hell? Like, what? And they're all just like, oh my god, yeah, we trust you now, because they had this little car ride, and they didn't talk during the car ride. They didn't have any moments where it would actually make sense that all of a sudden they are, you know, trusting this Cassie person with their lives. Like, all of a sudden, these 3 girls who are teenage girls who are all, you know, not doing the best in life, which they'll get into later, are all like, yeah, we'll just stay here. This is the totally safe option. This is fantastic. And, like, it's just so weird to me. It doesn't make sense. I feel like the people writing this plot had no idea what to do with the 3 Spider-Woman characters. And they're like, okay, well, we need them to interact with each other. We need them to get, you know, somewhere where they can be together. And the person's like, okay, what if we just have them in the middle of the woods? Let's do that. That works. Like, why? It doesn't make sense. And then, like I said, we don't get to spend a lot of time with them, so we don't get any, like, great introductions to them. And you could tell that they were trying to give them all some, like, character development, and they were trying to give them all, you know, something to do. And we're getting this moment where they're finally introducing each other, and there's some painful dialogue, like Sydney Sweeney's character just turning around and being like, I know Taekwondo. That was so out of left field. She said it with, like, no context whatsoever. None of them said anything else in response to it that really made sense. And it was just so awkward and uncomfortable. And every once in a while, they would have lines like that where they're just, like, trying to introduce themselves to each other. And they're just, like, starting off with, like, one of the most deep parts of their personality and something that's, you know, a massive trauma thing for them. And I'm like, how do they think people have conversations? Like, these 3 women have never met in their lives. And they're starting off with just, like, well, yeah, my parents are super duper rich and my dad works at a polluting company where they just make plastics that are going to slowly kill the earth one day. And then my mother spends all of his money on artwork that looks like shit and stuff like that. And I'm like, these people are meeting for the first time. That is not the kind of conversations they're going to be having. And it's so weird to me how they took their sweet-ass time with the first 30 minutes of this movie, introducing Ben Parker and May Parker and all these different things, and then they're like, okay, now that we're meeting the characters who are actually important for this film, we're just going to speedrun it. We're just going to, like, bam, boom, bop. They're going to have, like, 4 conversations the entire movie, and then they're going to be perfectly great best friends. They're going to know everything about each other, and they are going to love each other, and everything's going to be fine and dandy. And I that was annoying. That was terrible. The scene where they get up and they dance on the table, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the diner that they show in the beginning of the trailer, there's a sequence where the more extroverted one is, you know, basically peer pressuring Sydney Sweeney's character to go talk to these guys. And then randomly, the next time we see them, they're just up on a table dancing. And, like, Sydney Sweeney now has her shirt like this for some reason, and they're just dancing on a table at some diner in front of some guys that they just met. Weird. And then, what's it called? All 3 of them get into it. And it's so weird because, like, I understand that the power of an extroverted friend should not be underestimated because extroverted friends can get their introverted friends to do some things. But I feel like it would take way more than, you know, just being a friend to get them to go dance on a table, especially when none of them have showed interest in each other. Like, they all have hated each other the entire movie. It was so weird. It was so weird. It's like the people making this movie had plans for specific scenes, but they didn't know how they were going to get there. And they also didn't know what the characters were going to be like at all. So they were like, okay, how about this? This is how they made this movie, right? There was a group of people. They had all been assigned random parts of the movie. This person was, you know, assigned the first 15 minutes. This person was assigned the next 15 minutes, and then so on and so forth. And that's why none of these storylines really flow well together. The pacing of this movie is absolutely terrible. The dialogue is so weird because there are some sequences where the dialogue is fantastic. And it's like, it's not anything like life-changing or whatever, but like Dakota Johnson is having a conversation with a character who is close to her mother, and he gives her some kind of like advice for how she could be the best version of herself or something like that. And it's corny, yes, but I think that overall that dialogue works. And then there's other sequences where Sydney Sweeney just turns around and is like, I know Taekwondo. What? Okay, it's so weird. It's so weird. And then, what's it called? If you guys did it like the Marvels, because they tried to do like slumber party things and just make the girls like best friends out of nowhere, this movie is 10 times worse at that. They just randomly like all, you know, have a slumber party in this motel room or whatever, trauma dump on each other, like I said, and they all like bond over teaching each other like CPR, which is such a weird scene. But yeah, that was a movie. What was the thing that I wanted to get back to earlier? I think it had something to do with Dakota Johnson's powers. Oh, okay, yeah. My last little complaint that I'm going to do before I give my final score for this movie. The first act, obviously, Dakota Johnson gets her powers. Madam Web starts Madam Webbing all over the place. And basically, for people who don't know how her powers work in this movie, she basically is seeing the future, but the way that she's seeing it, she's not just seeing the future, she's basically experiencing the future. So there's a couple sequences at the beginning of the movie, and when I say a couple, I mean it felt like goddamn 40 of them, but it would be like, okay, a scene plays out a little bit, and then we start over at the beginning of that scene, and then it plays out again. And Dakota Johnson's the only one who's like reliving this moment. She's really confused. And so the first time it happens, it's like her and Ben Parker, and they're just sitting out or whatever, and they have like this weird interaction. And she's like, "Oh my God, you just told me that thing. Why are you telling me that thing again?" And then a little while later, it happens again. Once again, she has no idea what's happening. She's really confused. She's just like, "We just had this conversation. Why are we guys doing this again? Is that part of the game?" And then again, the thing happens, she still doesn't understand what's happening to her, and it really drives me insane because, like I said, it felt like they did it like 30 times. They did it probably at least like 10 times in the first 30 minutes of the movie or whatever, where it'll be like, here's the beginning of a scene, cut it back, here's the same scene again, but now Dakota Johnson's aware that she just lived that same moment, and she doesn't, what's it called? It takes her like 40 times before she realizes, oh, I'm seeing glimpses of the future. And it's so painful to me. It's so painful. But yeah, that being said, this movie, it was pretty bad, but I don't think it was nearly as terrible as a lot of people are saying it is. I didn't think it was that good. But like I said, I thought that the third act final like set sequence or whatever was pretty interesting. If you've ever wanted to see a movie of Dakota Johnson committing a bunch of crimes, it's not terrible. She steals multiple cars in this movie. And she randomly goes to Peru for a week. She kidnaps 3 girls. Interesting. But yeah, overall, I'm going to give this movie a solid 23 out of 100. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. I've definitely seen worse movies. And I enjoyed bits and pieces of this movie. I thought that some of the symbolism looked good, like I said. And what's it called? Ezekiel Sims was not a great villain, but I definitely do think that there were a couple of action moments with him that worked well. So that's neither here nor there. But yeah, that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. If you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe. And I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out.
Back at it again, but that's a relevant flow. So smooth, they calling me Mr. Elegant. Like an elephant, I got a long nose. Like a president, I've got a few hoes. Swift with a stutter, I'm smooth like butter. Don't see it coming when I slip undercover. Like a big dog, but I don't bite. I'm still a big broad, I'd win that fight. Come match you and I knock out your lights.